What's going on? All right, so 11:02. This is our week 13. Okay. So for this week, we actually have time for a few more poems. Okay. If we were in class, we probably would have started reading Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, which is, don't forget, the subject on which your final MLA research essay is due at the end of the term. More on that in a moment. Okay. A few more poems we have time to do. You guys have just turned in your analysis essay on John Keats' Ode to a Nightingale. Some of you have emailed me versions, rough draft versions, and we went over that. It was only a handful of students who did that. Thank you for doing that. So that's under our belts. That'll come back to you all in 2 weeks' time, probably sooner than that, as we all have a lot more time being in front of our computers these days. So those will probably coming back sooner rather than later in that 2 week time window. But don't forget our next essay, which would have been an in-class essay, is in fact going to be electronically submitted like all of our other non-in-class essays, okay? And it is on, as I've already told you all, Shakespeare's Sonnet 60, okay? So that's going to be due on the 10th, not this Friday, but the following Friday. You have plenty of time. We looked at it briefly, okay, before we were all housebound, before spring break. And I'll probably talk about it in more detail next week. Next week, we're actually going to have a little sonnet unit. Okay, I do want to talk about the sonnet. Arguably one of, if not the most important form of poetry in a lot of respects. So we'll talk about it next week. We'll look at some other sonnets as well. Petrarch we'll look at a sonnet by Milton, and then we will talk about the Shakespeare sonnet. I have the prompt for the in-class essay in Canvas. Go to Canvas, okay, look at assignments. You'll see the in-class essay section. Click on the Sonnet 60 link, and I have an explanation of what we are going to do. Okay, I'll just give you a little abbreviated version of it right here. Basically, what I'm asking you all to do is look at the final couplet. Remember, a Shakespearean sonnet is going to follow the sonnet form, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then at the end is a rhyming couplet, G, G, okay? And typically, conventionally, Shakespearean, Elizabethan, English sonnets are in iambic pentameter, okay? Not all, okay? There are sonnets that buck the trend, even contemporaries of Shakespeare and those who came before him, those who popularized the sonnet form before Shakespeare in England. Things are a little different formally. We won't go into the specifics on that right now. But what I'm going to ask you all is, or what I have asked you all is, how does that rhyming couplet, how is it in conversation, let's say, with the preceding 12 lines, okay? Do you notice that that rhyming couplet is contradicting the argument or arguments that are set out in the preceding 3 quatrains? Do you find that the final 2 rhyming couplets complement what is being argued in the preceding 3 quatrains? Okay. And you're answering this in terms of content and form. So form, we talked about aspects having to do with rhyme, with meter, okay, maybe even the sounds of poetry, assonance, consonants, things like that. But also, what about the content, the themes or messages, the ideas that are covered in the poem, do you find that Shakespeare is saying one thing in the first three quatrains, or maybe he's saying something different in each of the three quatrains? Quatrain 1, 4 lines, what's he saying there? Quatrain 2, second 4 lines, what's he saying there? Quatrain 3, next 4 lines, what is he saying there? 12 lines, okay? And then remember, a sonnet is going to end, and that rhyming couplet is sometimes called a turn. The Italian word volto, when we talked about a little brief introduction into Petrarchan or Italian sonnets, okay? And the Italian sonnet, there's an octave or an octet, the first 8 lines, and then there's a sestet or a volta, the final 6 lines, that complements or complicates or contradicts what has been said previous to that. Similarly, in an Elizabethan, Shakespearean, English sonnet, the final rhyming couplet is going to do that with the preceding 12 lines. Complement it, contradict it, complicate it in some way. So that's what I'm asking you all to analyze and think about with Sonnet 60. How does that rhyming couplet, how is it in conversation with the preceding three quatrains? Okay, so that's going to be due next Friday. The due date is Friday. The due time is 8:55 a.m. Okay, so we're not simulating it as though we are in class and you only have 55 minutes in which to do it. Okay, it's open. I think I have it open at the beginning of next week, so the 6th, I guess that is. But it's going to close. You have to turn in that in-class essay, again, through Canvas. There's a Dropbox setup. No later than 8:55 a.m. that Friday. Okay. I'm sort of imagining that we are in class. Remember, I gave you guys 55 minutes for the first in-class essay on Kafka. Okay, so that's why the end time is 8:55 a.m. Okay, as though we are in class in a sense. Okay. So that is going to be due. Go ahead to, getting back to our final project we have in here, is devoted to Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. First of all, have you read it yet? 3 acts. It's not terribly long. This is a play written in the final few years of the 19th century, so kind of the late Victorian era in England. The language is probably a little more recognizable, certainly than Shakespeare. It's easier to glean the meaning from. It's a conversational sort of a play. It's very funny. Okay, a lot of things are poked fun at. Certain manners and conventions of the time are either ridiculed or made fun of in some way. So I hope you guys have read the play, or you should read it this week. Okay, and then in terms of what you have to do for this assignment, it's now in Canvas. Okay, go to Files, go to the Course Information main course folder, and you'll see the link there. I think it's entitled RPDESC 20, Research Paper Description 2020. Okay, open it up, and I've given you all what you need to consider. Okay, and the prompt, what I want you all to do. Okay, basically, what I ask you all to do is, out of all the different categories we've looked at in this course, plot, narration, point of view, tone and style, theme, symbol, setting, character, etc. Which do you feel out of those categories is most prominently demonstrated in the play? Okay. For example, do you think character is most prominently featured in the play? Perhaps you think it's theme. Maybe you think it's the setting. Okay. That's what I want you all to start thinking about. And then you could conduct some preliminary research. Kind of Can I go play around in the library's online databases? I've given you a pathway on how to do that in that ditto, okay? So I'm not going to say too much more about that. I'll let you all read the assignment description document, okay, the Word document, and kind of chew on it. Of course, you need to read the play, okay? You could also see movie. There are several film versions of The Importance of Being Earnest. There's one as recent as 2002 with Reese Witherspoon, okay? Plays are meant to be performed and viewed after all. Maybe it will help you to look at a film version of the play. Also, there's a film entitled Wilde, W-I-L-D-E. It's kind of a biopic sort of a deal about Oscar Wilde himself. Oscar Wilde is portrayed by the great Stephen Fry. Okay, maybe that'll help you kind of get into the world of Oscar Wilde. Okay, Oscar Wilde was the witticisms of Oscar Wilde. Okay, he had something to say, clever turns of phrases. He was kind of stylized himself as a dandy, a sophisticate, a man about town, but he also poked fun in a lot of those sort of elite conventions of Victorian England. So a fascinating character. Okay, maybe it'll help to read a little Wikipedia article about him. Maybe we'll talk about him in upcoming videos. I try to keep these brief and to the point. So maybe more on that in the coming weeks. But I just wanted to let you guys know there's also going to be, as we don't have an oral presentation opportunity, there's going to be a PowerPoint presentation in lieu of doing an oral presentation. I don't quite have all the specs worked out on that yet. I do know the due dates, though, the oral presentation. The PowerPoint is going to be due April 24th, and then the paper is going to be due 2 days later, Sunday, the 26th. Okay? That would have been the 27th through the end of that week would have been our final exam week. Okay? So, so on your calendar, circle the 24th. That's the PowerPoint presentation. And again, I'm working on the specifications for that, so hold tight on that, okay? And then the paper, the specifications are all there for that. Sunday the 26th. Circle that on your calendar, okay? Other things for this week. So as I said earlier, we do have time for some more poetry. Next week we'll talk about the sonnet, little Petrarch, little Milton, and the subject for your paper, Shakespeare Sonnet 60, in a little more detail. But for this week, I'd like you to read in chapter 15 of the Norton, which is entitled Language, Word Choice, and Word Order. William Blake, who was kind of a proto-romantic, one of the earlier romantics in English poetry, his poem London, which is going to say a lot about the conditions of the industrial age at the time. Gerard Manley Hopkins, a Victorian English writer, Christian writer, Pied Beauty. A lot of playful sounds, a lot of playful word sort of wordplay is going on in Gerard Manley Hopkins. And then a modernist imagist writer, William Carlos Williams, his two most popularly anthologized poems. They're very short, they're very succinct. Some might even ask, are these poems? Is this poetry? The Red Wheelbarrow and This Is Just to Say. And then there are questions that accompany each of those poems. I want you to do those questions for this week. Okay, I think I have them due as of 8:50 this Friday. Okay, so what is that? The 6th. There's Dropbox set up. So, and that's 4 questions. There's one for the William Blake poem on London. There's one on the Gerard Manley Hopkins poem on Pied Beauty. There's one for the Red Wheelbarrow, and then there's one for This Is Just to Say. The 2 William Carlos Williams poems have a question each. So all in all, 4 questions, okay, in the Norton that are going to be due the end of the week, Friday. Okay. Interesting. You might want to read the authors on their work section, William Carlos Williams, page 862, that immediately follows This Is Just to Say. And he kind of talks about um, his, his kind of understanding of poetry, his philosophy about poetry, what makes poetry poetry, why is his poetry considered poetry in his own words? Okay. So it might be worth reading that. Okay. So I've given you a little taste of early English Romanticism, a little taste of English Victorian uh, literature with very in a very Christian light there with Gerard Manley Hopkins, and then I've given you a little modernist imagist flavor with the Red Wheelbarrow, and This Is Just to Say. Images, focused on the images themselves, the things themselves. Okay, so William Carlos Williams is kind of going to pull the rug out from underneath a lot of you all, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. Okay, certainly going to read a heck of a lot different than the Hopkins and Blake poems, especially the Hopkins poem, which is very florid and it's a lot of it's really quite a Gerard Manley Hopkins is a lot of fun to read. He invents his own words, okay, um, things like that. So quite fun. So that's for this week. 4 poetry selections for this week. Okay, 4 questions. Don't go to sleep on Oscar Wilde and the importance of being earnest. Okay, look at the instructions, the assignment sheet in Canvas. It's there. Forthcoming is the specifications for what we're now calling and what is now a PowerPoint presentation in lieu of our oral presentation. I'll have all the instructions with that with next week's announcement. Okay? So I think that is going to satisfy us. I try to keep these, we're going to push 15-20 minutes today. That's where I try to keep them nice and short and sweet. If you guys have any questions about anything at all, okay, let me know. Stay in touch with me. We are on Canvas now to the end of time, okay? No, now certainly until the end of the semester. That's true, okay? Maybe even into the summer too, if anyone's taking summer courses. So please stay in touch with the school and stay in touch with me too and all of your other instructors. All right, everybody, I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. Hope you all are doing well, staying safe, and not getting too stir crazy. See you